here. Is that all right? Good afternoon. Welcome back to the session 5 on ocean energy. My name is Amjad Abdullah. I'm the head of the partnerships at the International Renewable Energy Agency. I'm pleased to moderate this session. We have 3 parts for this afternoon. The keynote address, the partnership presentations, and the last interactive dialogue with esteemed panelists here. Without further ado, I think it's always nice to be among small islands. Well, I would call it big ocean states, because we're talking about ocean energy here. So it's very dear to us, and especially for Irina, to be talking about the ocean energy, the ample amount of potential for harnessing the ocean, energy from ocean. I think that would be one of the solutions for island communities in the future. I have the 2 keynote addresses from Excellency Minister Shauna. Unfortunately, couldn't travel here due to the logistics. Minister Shauna from the Maldives is the Minister of Environment, Climate Change and Technology from the Maldives. I have a pre-recorded video from Minister Shauna. Can we play the pre-recorded video?
Excellencies, colleagues and friends, good morning and very warm greetings from the Maldives. Today's topic is connected to us in every possible way. As you're probably aware, the Maldives, Palau and small islands are extremely climate vulnerable. The highest point in our country is just 1.5 meters above sea level. And we are comprised of 1,200 islands. So the sea is just all around us. Sea level rise is a threat to our existence, which is why reducing global greenhouse gas emissions is a question of national security for us. We have increased problems of coastal erosion now happening on most of our islands, as well as groundwater contamination and bleaching of our coral reefs. Being a small island state also means we depend heavily on our oceans for income, food security, and survival. Despite these grave scenarios we face, we want to be part of the solution, and we are leading the way today. We're the 7th largest reef system in the world, and we have already protected 13% of our reef area. At a national level, we have tripled our efforts to conservation by designating ecologically significant areas, mostly marine areas, as protected areas. Waste management continues to be a problem for us. Marine plastic pollution is increasingly becoming a threat to our oceans and for our own health as well. And that's why we are phasing out the use, import, and production of single-use plastics in the Maldives by 2023. At the moment, the Maldivian economy is largely run on imported diesel, which is dirty, expensive, volatile in price, and a huge drain on our nation's foreign currency reserves. The Maldives would like to rapidly deploy renewable energy, primarily solar, which is no surprise given our reputation as a sunshine holiday destination. President Solih in 2021 announced the goal for the Maldives to become net zero by 2030, and the world's most aggressive mitigation target. For us to reach this target, we cannot ignore the vast ocean that surrounds us. We have significant potential for generating energy from ocean resources. As we speak, several efforts are being underway towards exploring different ocean resources for energy generation. One such initiative includes testing prototype wave energy converter units in the Maldives with the aim of supplying a sustainable energy source. This unit captures energy from surf waves along the shoreline and converts it into usable electricity. We are hopeful that such pilot projects will facilitate long-term pathway towards achieving our energy transition goal to cleaner energy sources. We are also developing necessary legal and regulatory instruments to optimize the use of ocean for energy generation. This includes formulation of regulatory frameworks for the installation of floating solar PV systems in the shallow lagoons of our islands. At present, we have different models that private sector can invest in our energy sector. This includes net metering model, power purchasing agreements, and unsolicited proposals models. What is holding back renewables in the Maldives is not politics. We have the world's most ambitious mitigation target, nor is it economics. The cost of producing a unit of electricity with solar power is much cheaper than producing a unit of electricity using diesel. In many remote island communities, switching from their existing diesel generators to solar power offers the opportunity for fantastic cost savings. The problem in the Maldives and other small islands is one of finance. It's extremely difficult to access finance for us. It takes years for the money to come through, and when it does, it is often for projects that have since become obsolete. Much of the climate finance is just unnecessary bureaucracy and tedious demands on developing countries. It is difficult to access this finance, and the high cost of capital makes the cost of many renewable energy projects in the Maldives a non-starter. As such, the rollout of solar power is limited. For the global financial stakeholders, this provides an opportunity. If international financial institutions could underwrite the risk of clean technology in the Maldives and small island states, that would substantially lower the cost of capital and make them commercially viable, thereby enabling the Maldives and small islands to rapidly transition to solar-based economies. Indeed, many privately owned resorts in the Maldives would enjoy healthy balance sheets and can borrow cheaply, and they have been able to quickly install solar power and are enjoying cheaper and cleaner electricity. Before concluding, I'd like to thank SIDS Global Business Forum and its secretariat for hosting this dialogue and providing an opportunity to share our challenges and present our status of the deployment of ocean energy, in particular the efforts we are making in renewable energy. Thank
you very much, Minister Shauna. Very inspiring remarks. I'm sure, we are all aware the ample opportunities that lies around our oceans, and I'm sure, Minister Shauna has highlighted the enabling frameworks, the potential, and what entails is the adequate and speedy access to finance. I think that's a key here. Thank you very much. And the next keynote is His Excellency Christian Jensen, the Special Representative from Denmark. Over to you, Christian. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity. First of all, let me start by saying how pleased I am finally to be here together with you at the SIDS Global Business Network Forum. Denmark has been a donor to the network since 2015, and after many postponements of this forum, I'm so pleased finally to be here in person with you. Denmark is also honored to co-host this session on ocean energy together with the Maldives and Irina. The topic of ocean energy is critical. It is of critical importance. The recent IPCC report on adaptation demonstrated the extreme vulnerability that more than one-third, listen to this, more than one-third of the population is actually facing right now because of climate change. The impact will be devastating, especially on the SIDS, and this despite the fact that the SIDS have contributed virtually nothing to the current climate crisis. Last week, as the IPCC released its report on what is needed to reduce emission, the report was clear, crystal clear, in its consequences and its measures unless governments everywhere reassess their energy policy. The world will be uninhabitable. Not difficult to live in, but uninhabitable. Meeting the 1.5 degree target requires dramatic reduction in fossil fuel use. The good news is that the cost of renewable energy sources, especially solar and wind, has been decreased by 85% over the last decade. And as we just heard from the colleague from the Maldives, solar energy is now cheaper than diesel energy. So we need to do more. Fortunately, the capacity for renewable energy has been increased, and the signals is that there's enormous potential for renewable energy, including of offshore renewable. But the global efforts that we're seeing need to be strengthened to accelerate the deployment of offshore renewable to the benefit of climate, to the benefit of energy independence and job creation. Let me take the example of offshore wind. Offshore wind has the potential to become a major contributor to limited climate change and to delivering affordable, accessible, and reliable energy for all. According to the forecast for EAI and IRENA, 2,000 gigawatts of installed offshore wind capacity will be needed by 2015 in order to keep the 1.5 degree goal within reach and to achieve net zero by 2050. Yet, as of last year, global installed offshore wind capacity only totaled 57 gigawatts. Clearly, much more is needed to be done and to remove barriers and to scale up the investments, to invest more, and all actors, governments, organizations, private sector, financial institutions will have to work together in better ways and in new ways to see a difference. This is why Denmark, IRENA, and the Global Wind Energy Council are establishing the Global Offshore Wind Alliance. The ambition is to create a global driving force for the uptake of offshore wind through political mobilization and the creation of a global community of practice. We hope that SIDS will join in. Accelerating the transition to renewable energy, SIDS does not only reduce emissions and pollution, it will also stimulate the economy by creating new jobs, boosting economic recovery from the pandemic. It will reduce the fiscal burden created by the need to import fossil fuels, and it will increase energy security. And finally, it will also increase and help the resilience of healthcare systems through reduced operating costs. Scaling up renewable energy will also help us achieving another key ambition: to decarbonize the shipping sector by creating the necessary renewable energy capacity to produce green fuels. At COP26, Denmark, together with the US and the Marshall Islands, launched the Declaration on Zero Emission Shipping. Participating states pledged to strengthen global efforts to achieving the full decarbonization of shipping by 2050. We look forward to announcing the new signatories at the plenary session of the conference tomorrow, and we would like all SIDS to join the declaration. One of the ways that Denmark supports energy transition in SIDS is through our support to the IRENA Lighthouse Initiative, which contributes to lasting change and local ownership through its focus on capacity building and at both decision-making and technical level, and supporting the access to affordable financing. Be assured that Denmark stands ready to engage with SIDS on achieving their energy transition, and I look forward to continue to listen to the very fruitful discussion of today on how we can work together to realize the potential of ocean energy in the SIDS. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Christina. I think very inspiring remarks. Thank you also for being a continued partner with SIDS Lighthouse program in IRENA. We look forward to working very closely, especially on capacity building. You also highlighted identical issues as Minister Shauna said. I think it's the ambition. I think there is more than enough ambition from the SIDS. I think the political leadership is there. I think the key word again I was also trying to pencil out is the unlocking the investments and facilitating the adequate windows of opportunities in access to finance. I think that's a key. Thank you very much, Christian. The next session is the partnership presentations. It's pre-recorded videos. That's Ms. Alashe Fisher, the legal advisor at the Trade, Oceans and Natural Resource Directorate at the Commonwealth Secretariat. May I request the Secretariat to play that recorded video?
Thank you to the organizers of this event for the opportunity to present on such an important topic, and to also share the work of the Commonwealth Secretariat and our partners in this space. Supporting inclusive economic growth and strengthened resilience of small and other vulnerable states and developing countries through technical assistance or advocacy programs is a key area of focus for the Commonwealth Secretariat. To this end, and in partnership with Sustainable Energy for All, the Commonwealth Secretariat, under the Commonwealth Sustainable Energy Transition Agenda, has recently developed and launched a data-driven toolkit for supporting investment in clean energy in SIDS. The 38 nations classified as small island developing states by the UN form a distinct group of developing countries, 25 of which are members of the Commonwealth. And in the Commonwealth, we refer to our SIDS as large ocean states due to the sizable expanse of their maritime jurisdictions. Globally, the energy sector represents over 2/3 of total greenhouse gas emissions, a significant portion of which is attributable to the power sector. Despite contributing less than 1% of total global greenhouse gas emissions, states have been disproportionately impacted by and are on the front lines of resulting climate change events. Electricity consumption has steadily increased in SIDS to meet the increasing population demand. And among the many challenges that governments and communities must manage is access to and the cost burdens of energy. Most small island developing states rely heavily on imported fossil fuels, mainly oil for electricity generation and primary energy supply, as well as for transport, a situation that creates direct financial burdens, supply risks, and indirect costs associated with climate change. There are urgent socioeconomic, geopolitical, and environmental reasons for a transformation of the energy sector in small island developing states away from dependence on fossil fuels to renewable sources of energy. As with most challenges, the situation has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, which has resulted in increased vulnerability for SIDS and heightened the risk of slowing progress made across the SDGs. Lockdowns and disruption to supply chains have heightened the need for the transition to increase energy security and economic resilience. Now, while the ambition exists, and despite possessing ample renewable energy sources capable of meeting most of their domestic energy needs, SIDS lack sufficient funding to achieve this transition, and funders are still not at the table at scale, both private and public. The ambitious renewable energy targets expressed in nationally determined contributions and national plans will not be realized if the unique obstacles that SIDS face in expediting access to predictable and affordable finance for energy transition and climate action are not addressed. Working in partnership with Sustainable Energy for All, the Commonwealth Secretariat has developed a toolkit which aims to unlock clean energy investments for SIDS, many of whom, as I said, rely heavily on imported fossil fuels for power generation. Access to data remains a critical challenge when assessing the viability of projects in SIDS, as well as when conducting energy audits or promoting capacity building initiatives. To address this and other challenges faced by SIDS, the Commonwealth Secretariat, in partnership with Sustainable Energy for All, have developed a data-driven resource that supports the development of the business case for the clean energy sector in small island developing states. The toolkit is an analytical framework that quantifies the level of clean energy investment required to achieve a country's climate target for renewable energy share in its total energy mix and the associated impacts in terms of net financial returns, reduction in emissions, savings on national foreign expenditure and water use, and job creation. It also identifies specific policy and regulatory gaps and required measures to address them according to international benchmarks. The toolkit assists small island developing states translate their clean energy transition plans into investable business opportunities, and it supports analysis to address hurdles, such as the small size of projects, which lead to less interest from key international investors, the lack of adequate capital in local financial institutions, or restrictive legal conditions for foreign investments. The toolkit was launched in the margins of the UN Climate Change Conference at Glasgow and has been piloted in Seychelles. Using the toolkit, a country business case was developed for Seychelles that identifies the scale of investment required and provides an objective basis for credible strategies to attract and maximize the investment required to achieve Seychelles' clean energy goals. The launch event also included a roundtable panel with discussants from IRENA, the Green Climate Fund, and Bloomberg New Energy Finance, reviewing the Seychelles business case and putting forward potential options for accessing the finance required to accelerate Seychelles' transition to clean energy. The Commonwealth Secretariat and its partner Sustainable Energy for All are also planning a joint side event to showcase the toolkit at the ESI for All Global Forum in Kigali, Rwanda this May. Thank you for your time and attention, and I welcome the opportunity to take forward this conversation with interested parties.
Thank you very much, Mlache, for your presentation and the efforts that the Commonwealth Secretariat is undertaking. I also recognize that a number of large ocean states or seats are members of Commonwealth as well. The next recorded video is from Ms. Rebecca Williams, Global Head of Offshore Wind, Global Wind Energy Council. Please play the video.
Hello everyone, my name is Rebecca Williams and I am Global Head of Offshore Wind here at the Global Wind Energy Council. I'm going to talk to you over the next 5 minutes about offshore wind, small island developing states, and the role of public-private partnership in achieving a successful wind industry. First of all, I want to start with the obligatory overview of who GWEC, the Global Wind Energy Council, are. We're the voice for the global wind energy industry, and we bring together the world's leading wind and renewable energy associations from around the world, from Asia through to Africa, Europe, and Latin America, together with the leading corporate actors in the wind industry across developers, equipment suppliers, manufacturers, service providers, and more. We have great relationships with the leading institutions which influence wind policy, such as IRENA, IEA, UNFCCC, World Bank, etc. And we strongly collaborate with other renewable technologies, such as solar PV and the storage industry. I wanted to start by giving you an overview of the offshore wind industry as a whole and of the sector as a whole, and really set this discussion into context. So last year, GWEC and IRENA banded together to sign a UN Energy Compact, which pledges to deploy offshore wind in line with the IRENA net zero scenarios to a target of 2,000 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2050. And this slide here shows the huge gulf really between where we are now or most recently and where we need to get to in 2050 with around 90% of renewable energy. So that means we'll have to deploy 380 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030 and 2,000 gigawatts by 2050. Really, for me, this slide also outlines, therefore, the need for a coordinated response and rapid deployment of offshore wind and the policies in order to achieve that. So it really underscores the need to work collaboratively with governments to achieve these targets. I also just wanted to do a quick plug for our Global Wind Report, which came out last week, and it shows that 2021 marked a record year for offshore wind deployment. We saw 21 gigawatts of new offshore wind installations, 3 times as many as the previous year. The primary driver for that growth was from China, which as a country knocked the UK off its number 1 top spot in terms of the offshore wind market. But really, seen in conjunction with the previous graph, again, I think it just underscores how far the offshore wind sector will have to go and how much we'll have to grow in order to achieve that 2,000 gigawatt target. I want to now just zoom into some examples of public sector and private sector partnerships and explore this theme a little bit more before coming on to talk about small and developing states specifically. So one initiative that the Global Wind Energy Council is working on with IRENA and the government of Denmark is a new initiative called the Global Offshore Wind Alliance. And this alliance is committed to accelerating offshore wind deployment in line with the IRENA and GWEC Energy Compact. The alliance would bring together governments, industry, and multilateral institutions to create political momentum for greater ambition and delivery of offshore wind. Quite a few countries have already got their own established government industry dialogues for offshore wind. The UK being one example, we've also got such a dialogue happening in Japan at the moment. And we really believe that these public and private sector partnerships and dialogues are the best way to communicate shared learnings, to have that strong link between the delivery body, which is the offshore wind industry, and governments, and to design policy, therefore, that can rapidly deploy offshore wind in collaboration with those who will be deploying it. So GOA represents a fantastic opportunity to upscale that conversation, to really define and upscale the collaboration between private sector and governments, and to bring all these different actors and stakeholders together under one umbrella. Now moving on to look specifically at small island developing states. So this term encompasses, as I'm sure you're aware, a wide number of different countries who have very specific and distinct contexts and needs, opportunities and challenges. However, we have, as the Global Wind Energy Council, identified some common characteristics between SIDS. So they are as follows. We see lower power demand than from advanced economies. We also see growing power demand through economic growth and the electrification of transport and industry. We also see a high reliance on diesel generators, which have a very high per unit cost. We see a lack of large-scale industrial manufacturing, and also the unique characteristics of many SIDS being situated in deep waters and being subject to tropical storms. We also see greater exposure to the worst effects of dangerous climate change, and also the strong need for environmental leadership, just because of that unique positioning, being at the very forefront of rising sea levels and dangerous climate change. Looking then at the intersection between offshore wind and small island developing states, we see there the primary opportunity for offshore wind being in the Caribbean. This map from the World Bank SMAP program shows very nicely the significant technical potential in the Caribbean islands for offshore wind, both fixed and floating. And you can see there that the redder the colour, the more windy that site is. So you can see that this map here shows very significant resource. We also see opportunities in Fiji, Papua New Guinea, Vanuatu, and Mauritius. But in other small island developing states, the wind speed may be too low to be economic. I also just want to take a second to acknowledge the risk that many small island developing states face from severe hurricanes, and this map charts the course of major tropical storms around the world. So how can we therefore progress the conversation around offshore wind and small island developing states? I think the key point that is, as with many countries, really we now need to look at policy formulation and planning for a wider global rollout of offshore wind post-2030. This will be a crucial decade to put in place the building blocks for rollout post-2030. We also see floating wind evolving, and in many countries the starting gun has been fired and the race is on for floating wind. And in many of the markets here, we expect floating wind costs to come down and to see that technology rapidly accelerate. Floating wind really opens the door for small island developing states in the 2030s, but it would need consideration and planning now. So I therefore think that there's a lot to discuss when it comes to small island developing states. I think, therefore, there is an opportunity for offshore wind in small island developing states, especially when it comes to floating. But we need to see planning and coordination on this, especially about how we can deploy these technologies in line with other supporting technologies such as solar and battery storage. I'll leave it there, but thank you very much for listening, and please do get in touch.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Indeed, Irina with GWEC has signed a partnership agreement, and also we're working with the GWEC on the potential alliance for offshore wind. I think it was also inspiring to note that, you know, the floating offshore wind, which is also something that I'm sure, the SIDS can be benefiting that. This is something that's not quite applied throughout the SIDS as far as I recall. But this is, I'm sure, something that the SIDS can really work with the GWEC and potential partners on enhancing the offshore wind as potential renewable energy sources. Without further ado, let me also thank those two partnership presenters, and may I move to the third part of this segment, the interactive dialogue with the esteemed panelists. I have four panelists with me, Mr. Robert Wright, the CEO of New Leaf Power Jamaica, John Bolek, Government of Bahamas, OTEC project in Bahamas, and Mr. Tuti Chilotin, Micronesian Program Manager for Island Conservation, and Mr. Hank Roger, Founder and Chairman of Blue Partner Alliance. Robert Wright, the CEO of New Leaf Power Jamaica. Robert is the founder and chairman of the Financial Advisory for Sovereign Advisors, and one of his portfolio companies is the New Leaf Power, an innovative clean energy company headquartered in Jamaica. Robert, what are some of the unique challenges that you face operating in the Caribbean and broadly in the SIDS as a whole?
Well, thank you, Amjad. I appreciate that. Before answering the question, I just wanted to say how much we're all grateful and thankful for the hospitality shown us by Palau and by the organizers. It's a real privilege to be here. And well, coming from Jamaica, I feel very much at home here. In terms of your question, we do have abundant natural resources in the Caribbean, but we have challenges as well. Certainly one of the challenges, one of the risks is associated with weather events, tropical storms, earthquakes, and so on. And so that's a real risk that we have to manage. In addition to that, there's the issue of scale, where we have a number of small islands spread across the Caribbean, and oftentimes projects need to be of a larger scale to be economically feasible. And in Jamaica, we don't suffer from that so much, but the other islands, some of the smaller islands, have issues with scale. In addition to that, I would say our regulations, the regulations are mature in some places, immature in others, so the extent to which we have good regulations makes a huge difference. And Of course, everyone speaks about access to funding, and I think that's certainly true in the Caribbean. We have issues with access to long-term development funding. And I'd share a quick statistic with you. I used to run a foundation in New York, and we did a survey which showed us that only 1% of foundations in the United States were prepared to make donations to Caribbean countries. Only 1%. So there definitely is a challenge with funding.
Robert, you also touch upon some of the practices, but could you kind of elaborate on some of the practice that can be practice in SIDS? I know that you work in the Caribbean, but also that could perhaps be scaled up in the Caribbean, but also maybe something that could be also replicated in other SIDS in the Indian Ocean or in the Pacific.
Right. Well, as my former boss, Professor Rex Nettleford, who was Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, used to say, we are a living laboratory in the Caribbean. And so there are a number of the successes in the Caribbean can be scaled, can be replicated throughout the SIDS. I would focus on what our colleague from Palau mentioned earlier this morning, where she spoke about, in English we'd say partnership. She referred to it as Cle Cabalau, which is public-private partnership. I hope I pronounced that right. And that really is at the heart of any success that we've had. Really strong partnerships, whether with the public sector or the private sector. And I'll give two quick examples with our company. We had a partnership with the Jamaica Coast Guard, Jamaica Defense Force, to provide solar lantern charging stations at some of our offshore islands for fishing. And that was a great public-private partnership where we used their Coast Guard vessels, we used their bases, and I think that could be replicated. On the private side, we've had good success with partnering with other private companies overseas that have technology, have funding. In particular, we've partnered with a company in Holland called Blue Rise to develop deep sea water cooling, and it's just an invaluable partnership. So that's key to success. I would also recommend that we really look at diversifying our sources of funding to include more grant funding for research and development, and really target near banks, financial institutions, the entire ecosystem of financial services. I think it's important for us to tap into them, including pension funds, which are interested in long-term financing. And one of the examples of success that we've had is with crowdsource funding, where we were able to raise over €500,000 from a crowdfunding platform in the Netherlands, working with an overseas partner. So again, partnership is key, because they wouldn't have been successful without us, and we certainly wouldn't have been successful without them. And then finally, I think, local ownership, making sure that in small and developing states that we have local ownership, local participation, and deep engagement locally. We don't just want folks to parachute in and provide solutions. We want real local ownership and support.
Thank you very much, Robert. Homegrown, that is applicable in SIDS. I think very interesting practical examples that you highlighted. Thank you very much, John. Robert, next is John Bolek from Government of Bahamas on OTEC project. John is a professional engineer with extensive experience working in the US, Latin American and the Caribbean. Is currently working on the OTEC project under the Government of Bahamas. John, what are the determining factors in favor of OTEC technology vis-a-vis other forms of renewable energy such as offshore wind or solar PV? Over to you, John.
Okay. Yes, thank you for having me. And as you said, I'm from the water industry. And when we speak of OTEC, ocean thermal energy conversion, what makes it different for the Bahamas is that if there is one thing that we have in the Bahamas is for certain, we have a lot of water. We have a lot of seawater. But what is very peculiar with the Bahamas is that we have inverted geothermal conditions. So many of the OTEC ventures that you would have throughout the Pacific would be ocean-based OTEC, ocean thermal energy conversion projects. In the Bahamas, I can get that same cool water that you're chasing from the marine environment. I can get that same cool water from my groundwater wells due to the inverted geothermal conditions. So OTEC in the context of the Bahamas means that I can do OTEC as a land-based project, which makes it much more feasible. And as I said before, I don't have much land mass, so we're kind of looked away from the photovoltaic and the solar and the wind, and the wave energy is another possibility, but with the frequency of the storms, I would have to remove those assets each time. Basically from the months of June through November, I would have to remove that asset. But with OTEC, predicted that the surface water will get warmer. That facilitates my OTEC project. With the chasing of the cool water, we're presently using seawater reverse osmosis. So OTEC paired with the reverse osmosis project makes it very feasible in that the seawater reverse osmosis projects are all cash dependent, all energy dependent, and they're tied directly to energy. In fact, that the price of the water is based on the cost of the energy. So by pairing up, and these are all private ventures, most of the seawater reverse osmosis projects. So by pairing up with them, OTEC being ocean thermal energy conversion, use of the difference in temperature of the water. All I require is a 20-degree C difference between the warm water and the sea. We're talking seawater here, so I only require 20 degrees Celsius difference for the efficiency of the OTEC generator. It's, for those of you who are thermodynamically inclined, it's the Rankine cycle. And the most difficult part of this cycle is that I need to worry about the vaporization or the hot side of it. And that, what we plan to do is use the existing cool water source from RO and just use photovoltaic to increase the hot side using existing wells and pair it up with the existing technology and create energy. So, I mean, it's quite promising for the Bahamas in that, I don't have to go that deep for cool water.
Thank you very much, John. I know that's a lot of technicalities. I think I'm sure non-technical people, it's really difficult to grasp. I'm sure, people are going to be in touch with you on the technical aspect of that. Just very briefly, John, if you can just also touch upon which opportunities do you see for SIDS or SIDS companies, and how can governments support private sector engagement in the adoption of applicable or application of ocean and water energy? Okay. Just very briefly.
Okay, briefly, as far as the government goes, we have a mandate now where we have to do this. These are theories that we've been pushing around for years now, the reverse geothermal conditions, and we're now being told just do it now. The time is now, the time was now last year, the time was now 7 years ago, and we're done with now being the time. We're just going ahead and we're going to do it, and we have to do it. It's very promising. The byproducts from the RO, we're already bringing up the water and we're just dumping it back down. OTEC paired with reverse osmosis, there are countless opportunities for the brine that is produced. Cosmetics, mineral salts, other mineral and other there are so many things that we have not explored to do with the brine, because we were only being concerned from a water standpoint of creating fresh water. But now what we're doing is that same fresh water, that same salt water source, we want to take that same source of water and use the thermal difference of it to provide energy. And off of that, countless partnerships. One day what we hope to do is that, think of it where in the future, a household can provide its own water, a household can provide its own energy, and a household can also use the same temperature differential for seawater district cooling. So it has the promise of a building like this that we're providing water, we're providing energy, and we're also providing total AC for the entire day and night, just off of seawater.
Thank you very much, John. I think the water energy nexus, I think it's a very interesting, of course, I mean, it's something that is already practicing. I think if SITs are looking for the water energy nexus security issues, then that's one of the key areas that, of course, I mean, colleagues from SITs can look into. Thank you very much, John. Next panelist is Mr. Tuti Chidron, the Micronesian Program Manager for Island Conservation. Tuti has been working with the Palau on Energy Administration as a former executive director and continues to be the focal point for Palau's NDCs with the Pacific NDC Hub, and is currently working with the Micronesian Program Manager for Island Conservation. Tuti, I think Palau is committed to achieving its NDC goals through ocean energy and green hydrogen. How has that translated into private sector engagement in the development of ocean energy here in Palau? Tuti.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Amjad, for the question. I'd like to just first say thank you, Ambassador Seed, for being here with us today, our UN ambassador to Palau, to UN. I'd like to also recognize a colleague of mine, because I'm no longer in the Palau Energy Administration, so you're wondering why Island Conservation is talking about ocean energy. But the young man behind me standing up, Mr. Keith Itong, he's the new Palau National Energy Planner, and he's taken over that position. So I'm here to assist him and the Energy Department to give you an idea about what we're doing in the context of ocean energy. Specifically, how is it translated into working with private industries? We have currently two private partners who are engaging Palau. The first one is Sochit. It's a Japanese company. We've already made an agreement with our Ministry of Infrastructure starting next year to bring in green hydrogen fuel cells to Palau to test if they can be used as generators to energize buildings and then possibly transportation. So that's the first engagement that we're doing with Japan and specifically Sochit. The second company is called HDF Energy. They reached out through us from our partnership with ADB, willing to build a 5 megawatt hydrogen generator here in Palau, that we still need to engage with them in the context of, is it possible in Palau with our infrastructure issues, our size, and as well as the cost that will be able to come into Palau. But both partners are both interested in individual power production, so that the cost may be put to them as private partners, and then the Palau side will be able to provide the infrastructure support as well as government support. So those are the two big examples of green hydrogen. I'm very glad that Mr. Bolig is here to explain in terms of OTEC, because that's a possibility that happened in 1999 with Japan, and unfortunately it just hasn't come through, and that's mainly because of our engagements with our partners and the direction we need to take as a country. So those are the examples, Amjad, that I want to share with you.
Thank you very much, Tuti. I also recognize that Palau is also expanding on tourism, economic diversification, and perhaps one of the critical aspects is the conservation of ocean and marine resources. So could you also highlight on some of the environmental aspects or consideration that the private sector could perhaps be considering when developing ocean energy in SIDS, and how would that partnership play a role in addressing these? Because at the same time you're also looking into the business case, at the same time protecting the ocean and marine resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Amjad. I'm going to use the definition of environment in a very general term. So, of course, we're here, we talk about oceans. The environment is the ocean. The environment is the reefs. The environment is the actual land. And most of our islands are small enough that we may not be able to put all the solar that we want because of the location of the land and the topography of it. It's just not viable in the context. We would love to do OTEC, but we just don't have the marine lakes that is possible, like Bahama. So in that context, in terms of our conservation sites, if we do floating solar, we have to be careful where we put it at. We cannot put it too far out the reef. It just maybe costs more to bring it in line into the power stations, the reload stations that are necessary to be achievable. And at the same time, those are conservation sites. The other environmental challenge that I like to make sure private sector understands in the context of Palau as a small country is our human capacity. Often we have a lot of partners that will say, we want to give you detachable windmills that will come down in the typhoon times. I don't have anyone in Palau that can do maintenance on windmills. So you can give me a support, a human support development, that is something we need. So any type of energy project that needs to be done needs to include human capacity building, education components in the context of what it is. One of the other issues in small islands is, of course, our infrastructure. We would love to be 100% renewable energy, but is our current grid lines able to accept all of that energy that we put into it? We need to upgrade it. We need to put better weather or better critical weather lines, not telephone poles, electrical poles that are in place. How are we going to do all those things? So the environmental issues in the context of ocean, reef, mangroves, land are the easiest to address because you can see it. The human capacity issues, the infrastructure issues are things that we don't see because we're only focused on one aspect. So in the context of this oceans conference, consider that you cannot just focus on ocean without talking about the land, and you're going to talk about the land without focusing on the ocean. We cannot talk about energy in terms of technology if we cannot focus on energy in terms of human capacity building. All of us in small islands would love to be 100%. We just don't have to depend on importing any type of fuel to Palau. That would be great for us because our economy will grow and we don't have to worry about the increase in cost because of the fuel cost that's coming into Palau. That is a dream for everyone. The reality is we need to have a comprehensive, holistic approach. And I hope that answers the question in terms of everyone. Thank you, Amjad.
Thank you very much, Shuti. I think it's important to highlight the critical role of the capacity building. I think as much as SIDS would want to have the ambition, but it's about the consumption capacity. I think that's very key. Thank you very much, Tuti. The last speaker is Henrik Rogers. He's the founder of the Blue Planet Foundation, whose efforts have to Hawaii becoming the first state in the nation with a policy requiring that 100% of the state's electricity come from renewable sources by 2045. Robert, could you also tell us about how you are transitioning Hawaii to 100% renewable by 2045?
Yeah, so Hawaii imports $5 billion of oil per year. 30% goes to jet fuel, 30% goes to ground transportation, 40% goes to electricity. That's $2 billion a year. Imagine if that $2 billion a year could stay in the economy. How big of a difference would that be? So I started the Blue Planet Foundation with the goal to end the use of carbon-based fuel in Hawaii. Actually, my personal goal is to end the use of carbon-based fuel in the world. But Hawaii is my home, and I believe that we have to clean up our room before we ask other people to clean up their room. So I set about cleaning up Hawaii's room. And in the beginning, our lobbyists were up against the lobbyists of the utility, and the utility basically said, no, it can't be done. This is how we do business, and why should we change? We're making 10% on top of the price of oil. We have a good business model, and you want the electricity 24/7, right? And yet we said, no, actually, we want to go 100% renewable. And how do we get the politicians to change? Well, first of all, we had to get the people on our side. How do we do that? We did many things. One of the things that we did, for example, was that we had elementary school children go door to door and exchange 300,000 light bulbs, thereby having a conversation between a child and an adult about both energy saving and about climate change. We also changed refrigerators on outer islands at cost, because it's very expensive for people to ship energy saver refrigerators to outer islands. And we had junior high school students draw on sidewalks where you would have a 1 meter rise in, where high tide would be in a 1 meter rise in sea level. So we had our big success in 2015 with the mandate 100% renewable energy by 2045. And 6 months later, the utility came out and said publicly, you know what, we actually figured out how we're going to do this by 2040. And they went from not being able to do it at all to being able to do it by 2040. More recently, we changed the business model of the utility so they make more money the quicker they switch to renewables. Guess who's our best friends now?
Thank you very much, Hank. But perhaps I think that's very much applied in the in a state in U.S. Hawaii. But perhaps could you also think how could that be also applied across diversified or diverse range of islands across 3 oceans?
Yes, so the first thing that needs to happen is island people in their own jurisdiction need to make a decision. And the decision is that they want to go 100% renewable energy. Once you make the decision, everybody involved in your jurisdiction will start to think, how are we going to do this? And in Hawaii, we didn't start thinking about this until we had the mandate. So the mandate comes first. And who decides the mandate? It's the people and then the government. So everybody needs to get together and make that decision. And once the decision is made, again, everybody else follows suit. Now, we all think about, where are we going to get the money? In fact, the utility in Hawaii didn't spend any money on this. They just put out a bunch of PPAs. They asked for RFPs, and they put out PPAs. So they didn't actually have to spend any money, and now they're on track. We are at 35% renewable energy today, and the utility has come up with 2 RFPs, one for 800 megawatts and one for 900 megawatts of renewable energy. So we are 100% confident that they will make their date. We, in fact, think that the way they're going, they'll be able to achieve 100% by 2035. The date 2045 was achieved, it was a negotiation between us and the politicians. We wanted 2040, they wanted 2050, and we settled for 2045. But it turns out 2045 is the perfect date. Why is that? It's the 100th anniversary of the United Nations. So I invite all SIDS countries, in fact, all countries in the world, to achieve 100% renewable energy by 2045. What better outcome for the United Nations than to achieve 100% renewable energy by 2045? And there's a lot of talk about 1.5 degrees and 2.0 degrees and all of that, but the ordinary person doesn't understand what that means. An ordinary person thinks, 2 degrees, what's the big deal? And actually, it is a huge deal. So I believe that having a goal of 100% renewable energy is a much more clear of a goal than 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees. So if we can all just get behind 100% by 2045, I think we will solve climate change.
Thank you very much, Hank. Thank you all the panelists. I think we were very disciplined to be on time. Let me also request if there are any final points that perhaps from the panelists that may wanted to at least share with the audience. Yes.
Perhaps just a comment from the vision from Hawaii. The fun part is that if you do things the way you used to do and think you get a different results, then you should seek a doctor. If you want a different results, do something differently. And the way you're working with the mandate, the way that Maersk is working by going for zero-emission ships, ordering them now and then figuring out how to do the fuel, it's a great way to do it. Set the ambition out there. Let human creativity, let entrepreneurs, private sector, cooperation between public and private sector, let them figure out. But someone has to have the ambition and set the direction. And you did that at Hawaii, and it's so inspiring. So it's just great to hear.
Thank you very much, Christian.
May I?
Yes,
By the way, so Hawaii is first, Guam was second, or we have 12 other states. But the next place that we're going after is Palau. And on Friday, we will do our first eco-sprint. An eco-sprint is where we bring all the stakeholders into the room, and we have the discussion about how can we achieve 100% by 2045. We're talking about utility people, we're talking about economists, we're talking about engineers, cultural people, and students. I want to make sure that everybody who has something to say about it is in the room, and we start the conversation. And then we end the conversation when Palau has a 100% renewable energy commitment by 2045.
That would be wonderful. Thank you very much, Hank. Robert?
Yes, just wanted to really stress the importance of local ownership and to give you an example of that in Jamaica. So Jamaica was the first English-speaking island to develop utility-scale wind farms, and the government of Jamaica has built 3, 35-megawatt wind farms. But last year, the decision was taken to really make those farms, to have them owned by the people. And so what was done was, on our local stock exchange, these state-owned farms were divested and privatized on a local stock exchange with special provisions for public servants, for trade union members, for ordinary people to participate. And it was completely sold out within 10 minutes. Within 10 minutes, it was gone. It was one of the largest listings that we've had on our exchange. And this incredible resource and treasure is now owned by the people of Jamaica. So I think that's an example that we should all follow. We want to have genuine local ownership, and that's certainly one way of achieving it.
Thank you very much, Robert. Are there any questions from the audience? I don't see. Well, yes, Tuti? Please use your microphone.
If I may, Amjad, I just want to speak on behalf of the Palau Energy and now Water Administration and welcome all of you to Palau, and hope that this engagement between now and Thursday will allow us to continue to discuss and debate and find out different ideas that we can use. Please accept Palau as your home for the rest of the week you're here, and if there's anything else we can do, please let us know. Enjoy your time here in Palau, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Tuti. Thank you. I think we at the end of the session. I think it's going to be. I don't think that I can perhaps summarize all the key takeaways, but I think I would pick 3 things at least from the discussions. I think one, there is political commitment, at least from as far as I'm concerned, from the seats. The ambition is there. I think the enabling framework is something that has to be a continuous approach. Third is the capacity building. I think the fundamental key is the speedy access to finance. I think unlocking investments which requires a huge investment in capacity building, and I think the maturing of bankable projects is something that I think that also I gathered from the panel discussions. I think a continuous effort on capacity building. I think those are the few key takeaways at least from my perspective. But I'm sure, the Secretariat has taken due note of this, and will share the key takeaways, a detailed report of this discussion. Thank you very much again for all the panelists, and also I'm also pleased to be partnering with the UNOHRLS on ocean energy. We will continue to explore ways and means how we could harness the ocean energy potential in SIDS, in large ocean states, and IRENA stands ready to work with all the SIDS with UNHCR-LLS. And also thanks Denmark also for continued support for IRENA SIDS Lighthouse program. Thank you very much. Thank you. Over to you, Secretary.
Colleagues, Excellencies, distinguished participants, we are going to move right into session 7 and finish up the day a little bit early. So I know we have a reception, well, some of you have a reception to go to, so we're going to try to finish up on time. So this session is where we will bring the various strands of the forum together and consider the way forward. So we will have a presentation on the overall outcomes and key messages of the forum provided by a colleague from UN Department for Economic and Social Affairs, Mr. David Johnson. Then we will hear announcements of partnerships and initiatives, including by Mr. Chris Corker, CEO of the South Pacific Tourism Organization. And Chris, you can come up so that you can make your announcements soon. So with that, I'll ask David Johnson to come and present on the overall outcomes and key messages of the forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Tishka. Excellencies, distinguished participants and members of the SIDS Global Business Network, dear friends of SIDS and the ocean, good afternoon. Thank you all for participating in this forum today, and I thank the government of Palau and the excellent Palauan civil servants with whom we have worked very closely in the organisation of this forum. My name is David Johnson, and with my OHR LLS colleagues, I serve as the Secretariat for the SIDS Global Business Network and rapporteur of the key outcome messages of this forum. As the President of the General Assembly said earlier today, small islands have a strong voice, and it is important as we reflect on today's presentations and discussions to consider how this forum can add to and assist this voice. We are in a year of the ocean, and tomorrow we will continue these discussions at the Our Oceans Conference, and as the UN Special Envoy for the Oceans, Ambassador Peter Thompson, referred to, we will continue these issues at the United Nations Ocean Conference in Lisbon in June. Looking forward to these events, it is our intention to summarise the key outcome messages of this forum so that what we have concluded today can be heard at and influence these conferences and provide the language for the island voice. We have heard that private sector involvement is indispensable to the health and sustainable development of the ocean and can be the engine of creative solutions and innovations. That development of the ocean economy, or the blue economic security, as President Whipps very eloquently put it, is critical for SIDS. SDG 14 is the SIDS SDG, and that of all the SDGs, SDG 14 is by far the least funded, representing only 0.01% of all SDG funding. This is a funding crisis that needs to be addressed urgently. We have heard the results of the survey and research conducted by Mr. Paul Holtis of the World Ocean Council, giving guidance for successful ocean partnerships in SIDS and to improve the global business network. Partnerships across countries and sectors can allow all of us to overcome knowledge and capacity gaps, like the Palau fishermen learning about finance and business management, or youth bringing innovative ideas whilst simultaneously learning from the experience of established ocean experts. Fisherfolk across SIDS have a lot to learn from each other and to innovate and diversify ocean industries to strengthen resilience. Partnerships with the private sector can also spur innovation to overcoming daunting tasks such as sea level rise in Micronesia or achieving zero emission shipping. The global community can enable these partnerships, including through bringing people together across SIDS, like in our forum today, but also through financing initiatives like the Global Fund for Coral Reefs. We have heard reflections on the recovery of the tourism sector, presenting an opportunity to rethink and transform the industry to maximize its contribution to the SDGs. You and WTO demonstrated that the economic lifeline that tourism is for SIDS. It is a driver of economic growth, and as is actually Conrad Hunt of Antigua and Barbuda noted, a driver of sustainable development. Tourism in SIDS is critical for employment and inclusion of women and youth, as noted by Her Excellency Vanessa Fraser of Malta. And globally, up to 40% of the current blue economy is tourism related, and supports a considerable local employment. While we're seeing a global recovery in tourism and a nascent recovery in tourism in some SIDS, this recovery is not broad-based, and there are significant difficulties, particularly in the Pacific, where many islands remain closed. Investment in resilience has been important for the survival of the private sector in many SIDS. An investment in people is needed. Investment in people is investment in resilience. Partnerships have been and continue to be important in many sectors. We have heard the importance of public-private partnerships here in Palau and in protecting people and businesses from the worst effects of COVID. We have learned the Palauan word "Klechibelo" for the culture of public-private partnerships. We've heard many initiatives today, too many to list for now in total, but to name but a few. We have the Sustainable Tourism Initiatives from Iberostar, Maersk Green Corridor Initiative, and the Offshore Wind Alliance. And we will hear further initiatives in this session, including on tourism. We've spoken many times about partnerships during this meeting, and I'd like to draw the attention of the forum to the recently launched SIDS, United Nations SIDS Partnership Awards, which aims to recognise and reward the most noteworthy partnerships in SIDS. And I urge my fellow forum participants to visit the UN website for further information. Thank you for your participation, and hand back to Tishka.
Thank you, David. I will now ask Mr. Chris Cocker, CEO of the South Pacific Tourism Organization, to make an announcement in relation to the SIDS Tourism Working Group under the GBN. There you go.
Thank you, Tishka. Thank you to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to present an exciting new partnership that has recently been initiated. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have discussed some of the challenges that are present in SIDS tourism sector and potential ways to overcome this. To implement solutions, we are foremost to work together both regionally and also globally. Therefore, I'm honored and privileged to announce a newly formed partnership between various SIDS tourism organizations, the World Tourism Organization, and other relevant stakeholders. The partnership takes form in a working group that aims to collaborate on strengthening sustainable tourism in small island developing states by creating a system for support, knowledge sharing, and cooperation among SIDS tourism organizations and stakeholders, as well as jointly addressing the unique challenges that SIDS tourism sector faces, including those that were mentioned during today's sessions. The worker group is part of a SIDS Global Business Network under the UN SIDS Partnership Steering Committee. This partnership is formed by the African Tourism Council, ATC, Association of Southeast Asian Nations Tourism Association, ASENTIA, Caribbean Tourism Organization, CTO, Indian Ocean Tourism Organization, IOTO, and Pacific Tourism Organization, the United Nations Office of the High Representative for Least Developed Countries, Landlocked Developing Countries, and Small Island Developing States, and also the United Nations World Tourism Organization. Our working group also welcomes observers and development partners that wish to provide expertise and funding support. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And with that, I would like to thank all of our speakers during this session and indeed today for your very useful contributions. Please also note that we will circulate to all the participants an evaluation form, which we ask that you complete and return at your earliest convenience. We will now briefly suspend the meeting to allow the distinguished speakers for the closing session to take their seats, please. Sorry? Sorry? He's supposed to be here. If he's not here, then Ireland. Yeah, okay. So, distinguished participants, we will now resume the meeting, and I will immediately invite Mr. John Gilroy, representative of the Government of Ireland, to deliver his closing remarks. John, you have the podium.
Thank you. A little bit earlier than expected, but it's good to get these things over with as quickly as possible. So I'm not going to speak for very long. It's been a long and productive day, and we need to restore some energy for tomorrow's events. I do want to take this opportunity, though, to thank OHR LLS for bringing us together today. Ireland is really happy to support the Global Business Network this year through our contribution to the Office of the High Representative. It's important to recall that today isn't a once-off, a standalone event, but it represents an important staging post on a long journey which was set in motion back in 2014 during the Samoa Pathway, and has been followed up ever since in many different places of the world, including New York. It's important to recall that the partnerships approach that's at the core of the Samoa Pathway predates the 2030 Agenda, it predates the Sustainable Development Goals. What was put in motion in the context of SIDS, taking a meaningful and holistic approach to sustainable development which sought to harness the expertise and initiative of a really broad range of stakeholders, is something that the 2030 Agenda has sought to replicate with mixed results, I think it's fair to say. But it's vital that we close this circle, that we take what we are discussing and committing to this week back to Lisbon later this year, back to New York, back to the next iteration of the Samoa Pathway, the preparations for which will be starting soon in New York. So I'm going to leave it there. I look forward to seeing many of you over the next couple of days. We've got a lot of work to get through, but I think today has got us off to a really, really positive start, and we just have to keep our energy and momentum going over the next 48 hours. So thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much, John, for your statement. I will now invite Ms. Hades Corderas-Fox, Acting High Representative of UNOHR LLS, to deliver her closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Tishka, and Excellencies, dear friends. Yes, it has been a long but very exciting day. And I hope that it has been as enlightening to you as it has been for me. So one of the key takeaways that I bring from today is that while there is an urgent need to recover the economies of the SIDS from COVID-19, we really need to do it and ensure that it's done sustainably. And today's sessions highlighted that recovery from COVID-19 can transform economies to become greener, more inclusive, more innovative, and very crucially, more resilient. If succeeding to do so, SIDS can benefit from stronger and greener tourism sectors, preserved oceans, enhanced energy security, improved livelihoods, and strengthened resilience. To achieve such transformation, we need to work together across the sectors in partnerships, so I would really like to thank all of you for being here today. Thank you to the speakers for your invaluable contribution. Thank you to all of you, each and every participant, for your engagement. Thank you again for the governments of Denmark, Ireland, and Australia, as well as the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, for making this really possible. And mostly, thank you to our co-host, the government and the people of Palau. Thank you. To President Whips, Bilung Gloria Salih, who has allowed us to exhibit some of her collection of these beautiful artifacts here in the room. Ambassador Said, who has been a great partner in working together and really making this happen. Thank you to you. I'd also like to thank the Palau team, Bridge, Kiku, Edu, Essi, Lena, and many, many others who've been contributing to this event. The SIDS Global Business Network Forum, parts of the Year of the Ocean. The outcome messages emanating from this forum have value and will be heard in many international fora. And the issues we have discussed today will also be heard at our Ocean Conference over the next 2 days, in particular on the creation of sustainable blue economy. I hope that we can bring forward the ideas and the energy we have witnessed today in discussions over the next 2 days. So, Excellencies, colleagues, dear friends, as we bring the forum to a conclusion and refocus our attention to our Ocean Conference, let us not lose sight of our objectives and who we are here for. We are here for the small island developing states. It is SIDS who experience the most acute harm from damage to the ocean and our climate. It is SIDS who have suffered among the worst of the effects of COVID-19 pandemic, and many are still experiencing travel lockdowns. By their nature, many SIDS are geographically isolated, but they are not isolated from the international community, and I hope the outcomes of the forum today and the Ocean Conference will serve as a springboard for action at the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon. So let's continue these discussions with the same vigor and the same energy at the Our Oceans Conference. I look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Acting High Representative. Now I would like to invite our last speaker, His Excellency Caleb Udui, Minister of Finance, Republic of Palau, to deliver final closing remarks. Minister, please.
Thank you, and I promise these will be the final remarks today. Apologies for being a little late to this conference. Good news is I have a negative test result, so I think you're safe to be around me today. I prepared some short remarks based on the program and the inputs and some of the work that we've been doing here in Palau in this administration, which has basically just been about a year now. So I hope that you can see that there is a lot of relevance and action here in this government, and I hope that will help inspire you to take action in your respective jurisdictions and in activities. So if you indulge me, Your Excellencies, Your Honors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it must be true that promoting genuine and effective partnerships is an invaluable means to achieve the objectives of the Samoa Pathway and Sustainable Development Goals, because we have made progress on this front. And a friend of ours, one of our partners, shared with me the Multidimensional Vulnerability Index, and very appropriate to us in the Republic, as we have graduated as of January 2022. We're starting to feel the effects of what graduation from the OECD DAC ODA list means to a country in the Pacific such as ours. So we are here to attract greater interest and investment from the private sector. Our objective is we would like to increase their engagement in promoting sustainable development through durable partnerships. We believe there is interest from the private sector to do so. I'd like to share some observations as to how we get there based on our experience here in the Republic. First of all, as an ocean state, the ocean is most of our environment, and therefore the biggest asset for our economy. It is a source of tourism, our food, our climate, our transportation, and our inspiration. We must value this asset appropriately for efficiency so to maximize our benefit while limiting costs. So information is the key. I believe during this Our Ocean conference, we will highlight the efforts to do just this through ocean accounting. Second, as with any asset, proper utilization is necessary to receive benefits over an extended period of time. Utilizing accounting information, a balance between conservation and revenue generation can be struck. But how should we determine the appropriate balance? The measure should be the benefit to the people from this usage is at the heart of all of what our government does today. Third, we will need our partners to gain the right understanding as well as to contribute to the decision-making process. Their participation should make sense and add value to the process. I think that is what is happening in this Our Ocean conference this year. Palau itself has committed to very modern reforms as part of its effort to recover from the pandemic and find a way forward in the face of climate change, rapid developments in technology such as cryptocurrency, higher fuel prices, and other factors such as unrest in the region and the world. These reforms are intended to improve efficiency and utilization towards the benefit of our people. And these reforms could only have been done in partnership both from within and outside of Palau. I'd like to share a few of them with you. It's been a busy year for us, in particular my ministry. I think these are very large reforms for our country and will help in attracting investment to our country. The first reform that I'd like to mention among many is the Fiscal Responsibility Act and the creation of debt policy for the country. Our country, as your President may have shared with you this morning, has taken on a lot of debt just to keep ourselves operating as a government, as well as to help those most affected by the disruption and disappearance of tourism in our country. So debt policy is a very necessary, and fiscal responsibility, modern fiscal management is very important to us and to a lot of our partners who are trusting us to repay these loans. Tax reform, first in our region, was something that we passed after many, many years, over 20 years of effort. Mainly, this reform consists of a value-added tax and a business profit tax. But in trying to raise money in a more effective and efficient manner, we're also balancing the impacts to our population through salary and wage tax reforms. We've also made some reforms to our protection mechanisms, especially when it comes to climate change and disasters. by creating disaster resilient funds and gaining access to disaster lines of credit, in particular through the Asian Development Bank. We've also passed some private sector reforms, in particular acceding to the New York Convention and adopting international commercial arbitration. We've also made regulatory reforms for our state-owned enterprises. We've made revenue and policy enhancements for state-owned enterprises. We continue to borrow more money on concessional rates from the Asian Development Bank in Taiwan to effect a lot of these policy changes, as well as to try to put us on a recovery track. We've also joined many regional projects on information sharing and transparency, which I think are very important when it comes to partnerships. All of these initiatives, amongst many others, were made possible by close and continued work with our Palau Congress, the Palau private sector, non-government entities, Asian Development Bank, the World Bank, IMF, USA, United States departments and agencies, and this includes USAID, National Park Service, and the US Congress. I'd like to highlight the National Park Service in a project that we launched just this morning in conjunction with the 25th anniversary of our largest water source in the bigger island, Babadaba Island. I signed a memorandum of understanding with Deputy Assistant Secretary Keone Nakoa just this morning to launch a project with the National Park Service Denver Service Center to help develop sustainable parks in Palau, both environmental protection and revenue enhancement initiative. We also receive a lot of assistance from our bilateral and other business partners, foreign partners such as the United States, such as Japan, and such as the Republic of China, Taiwan. For these, we are all very extremely grateful. But I think for success with private firms, government must reduce the uncertainties in the market by providing appropriate environment for businesses to thrive. The environment is a big opportunity for business, but partnerships are required to turn that interest and opportunity to investment. Thank you for allowing me to share some words with you today.
Thank you, Minister Udui. And with that, all that is left for me is to say thank you all once again for your active engagement and participation, and to close the forum. So thank you and have a very good evening.